This is Tech in the News. It is currently Friday, July 24th, 2020. Waited till the afternoon to make today's video, mostly because we had the Xbox Series X announcement yesterday, and so I was just wanting to go through, see all the articles there are, see which ones grab my attention, and then find the best one and go from there. So, the one that I found from The Verge is 1 week later, it looks like Microsoft is already breaking a big promise with Xbox Series X. So, the issue being here was that Microsoft promised that all of its games, the ones that were going to be coming out, like the big titles, like the release ones specifically, usually you would assume that they're for the Xbox Series X, or, usually whenever a new console launches, whatever its title, flagship games are, you expect that those are only going to be able to be played on that new console. Well, what Microsoft went ahead and did was they made multiple promises, as we can see here from different sources, saying that the content would be available for all platforms, for like Xbox One, S, X, stuff like that going forward. So let's see here. What did they say? Well, in fact, the company explicitly promised that its own in-house first-party games won't require you to buy a new Series X console for 2 whole years. That's a long time. Here's Xbox boss Phil Spencer just last week. You won't be forced into the next generation. We want every Xbox player to play all the new games from Xbox Game Studios. That's why Xbox Game Studios titles we release in the next couple of years, like Halo Infinite, which I don't know if you guys have seen it, I thought looked like trash, will be available and play great on Xbox Series X and Xbox One. We won't force you to upgrade to Xbox Series X at launch to play Xbox exclusives. That's what they said. Here's a couple more examples that also highlighted that. So, here is the Verge counterclaim. But during today's Xbox Games Showcase, first-party titles like Forza Motorsport, Fable, Avowed, As Dusk Falls, Everwild, and State of Decay 3 were all listed as coming to Xbox Series X and Windows PC specifically, with no Xbox One support and no smart delivery feature. Again, these are all games published by Microsoft's Xbox Game Studios, and almost all created by developers that Microsoft owns. So, to my mind, as the author here writes, which is, let's give them credit here, Sean Holster, to my mind, that only leaves 3 possibilities. Microsoft broke a huge promise in record time. 6 out of the 9 next-gen exclusive Microsoft showed today wouldn't arrive until 2 years after launch to meet that 2-year requirement that they said you won't have to upgrade for at least 2 years. And finally, 3, someone screwed up when making the presentation title cards for each game. So, I'm not going to read any more into about why or not, this is... Well, okay, maybe I will. Alright, so here we have... And then we have a Microsoft point-blank yes or no. That's what they asked them. Whether it's still committed to the promise and whether the title cards were inaccurate, the company wouldn't say. It pointed us to this tweet by Xbox marketing boss Aaron Greenberg, which doesn't make things any clearer. Future one-player titles are developed for the Xbox Series X first. Not saying those games won't ship on Xbox One, only that we are leading with Series X, and each studio will decide what's best for the game/community when they launch. So, what they're saying is, in Microsoft's promise that they can make the games for the Xbox Series X launch, okay, they can also make them for the Xbox One, should they decide to do so. They don't have to, essentially, from Aaron Greenberg's statement here. They're only going to extend that launch to the Xbox One if they can't get enough players, I believe, to jump over to the Series X. So, if the Xbox Series X performs outstandingly well, and a bunch of people buy it, and everybody goes and gets this game, or this release game, then they probably won't ship it back to the Xbox One, just because they know they've already met maybe a quota, a sales goal that they had. But if they're not seeing the sales in Series X that they probably want, they might make adjustments to the game to allow it to be played on Xbox One. So that is my assumption on this series here. The one thing that I think Microsoft did terribly was that they made the promise, or made the assumption, or we made the assumption as well, but based on what they were saying, it's kind of obvious, that they blatantly said, we're going to have all these title games, and they're going to be cross-compatible between different generations of Xbox. That was a terrible thing to say. I think most people, when they hear of new gaming consoles, usually that's one of their top 10 questions that they have, will be cross-compatible with previous generations. And usually the answer I always think to go to is no. That doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? If you're making a new, better console, you should have new, better games. You shouldn't be having to go back to play old games. That's what those old consoles were for. So I think Microsoft kind of did a little bit of a hiccup there in what they were saying. I think they should have just stuck with, this is our new console. It's going to have new games. We'll talk about backwards compatibility at another point in time, but for right now, if you buy this console, these are the great games that you're going to get. And based on what we saw, I don't believe that a lot of the games were going to be worth the hype of buying a Series X. So that is all I have to say on the matter. I'm not really completely surprised by Microsoft's promises and claims that, it will be instantly backwards compatible and that the games will work on different consoles, stuff like that. I just think that's a load of bull, but that's just my opinion. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a good one.